everybody. Kylie Davis here from the Proptech Association. And it is great to see you here for our Proptech panel on local government. Now, I'm actually here on Yuin land, home of the Binja Yuin people on the very beautiful far south coast of New South Wales. I'm actually in a place called Binji Corner, which was named after the Binja Yuin people. And before I begin, in the spirit of reconciliation, the Proptech Association Australia acknowledges the traditional owners and custodians of country throughout Australia and their connection to land, sea and community. I was telling the fellas before, I've got kangaroos on the lawn, I've got an echidna in my rockery, and I've got a frog in my letterbox. So there's lots going on down here. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people joining us here today. And I'd especially like to thank the fabulous support of Stone and Chalk, who make our Proptech panels possible. And for those of you who don't know Stone and Chalk, it was founded as a not-for-profit in Sydney in 2015 to help fintech startups commercialise and grow. And from 40 startups in 2015, it now has over 200 startups in Sydney, 2 offices in Sydney, Melbourne and Adelaide, and covers all areas of emerging technology, including the very fast area of growing of PropTech. So I think there's about 30 PropTechs that call Stone and Chalk home now. So the digitisation of local and state planning regulations is creating massive data sets that are transforming, or should be transforming, the way that we plan, design and approve new homes and build new communities. And my panel of experts in this area is Dr. Benjamin Coorey from Archistar, Will Sullivan from Propcode, and Tom Young from uDrew. Welcome, gents.
Thank you for having us.
So look, what we're going to do is a little bit different this time. We're going to dive straight in with some general questions because I want to set the scene of what's going on in local government and what the kind of space is that we're playing in here. So urban planning, from my sort of very top view, feels like it's one of the last data sets to have been digitised in Australia. Who wants to go first on, is that true and why is it the case?
I can start. So I would say one of the key reasons is that a lot of urban planning information and therefore the data sets that contain that information is, of course, owned and maintained and created by local councils, of which there's over 500 around the country. And data is not necessarily the expertise of local councils, right? It's service delivery, it's kind of maintaining great communities, and so those are things where they're really focused on their customer being their residents. Data sets are obviously somewhat of a newer, I won't say brand new, of course. Data sets have been around for a few decades as a concept, but it is a thing that councils have kind of slowly made their way into and kind of recognizing it's more, they're going to be more effective and more efficient in their own service delivery. But then also there's obviously an ecosystem, especially more and more technology where people want to use that data. And so there's creeping improvements in councils working with data sets, creating data sets. But they're somewhat risk averse. They're not necessarily on the front foot of technology a lot of times. And so, yeah, in contrast to other fields and other sectors, I would definitely agree that local governments are probably not as advanced when it comes to data sets.
Yeah, look, councils are often quite small too, aren't they? And they're often very pressed in terms of their resources. So, and investing in data is actually, often can be quite a big undertaking. So, what out of the 500 council areas that we see out there, what proportion are being proactive in this space? Ben, do you want to give us an insight into that?
Yeah, so I would say that it's a small number that are being proactive. But if you look at kind of like the state level, like in New South Wales, a lot of planning data is available open source, and that's mainly around zoning, heights, floor space ratio. So there's quite a lot there. But what you do start to see is that every council localizes their requirements, and those aren't necessarily digital. So it's kind of a mixed mode. Like there's quite a lot of base data out there, but once you get into the details, that's council by council, and it's local rules that are designed to keep within the character of that. You know, like every council is like slightly different, and the community moves into that location expecting, you know, that kind of look and feel, and that's what they like. So yeah, so every council's kind of got these localized rules that are designed to kind of keep that character. That by nature is not very digital, you know, or data centric, and that's, you know, you are starting to see some councils say, well, how do we make that more digital, easier to ingest, and I guess more objective and less subjective.
I mean, because it was a big undertaking for a lot of councils to actually move from paper files to just PDFing things, right? So like, I'm assuming that a lot of that data is sitting in PDFs and in shared drives and just in really unstructured data sets. Is it sorry?
Yeah, I would say that like probably like for prop tech companies to ingest that data, you know, a lot of it's geospatial. So you want to be picking up GIS layers or APIs that you can kind of read those rules and do something with it, whatever you're doing. The nature of, like, if you look at, you know, development control plans in New South Wales, they're done council by council. It's typically a Word document where they describe all the things that they would like. It's PDF'd, and you've got that PDF to work with. If you try and throw one of those into ChatGPT, because they were built so long ago, it's like can't compute, doesn't understand what, you know, the structure of this is. There's quite often diagrams in there, you know, like to show you what that design should look like, which is very difficult to interpret out. So and every council can kind of do it in their own way. And so there's no standardization across that. So PDF is there. When you're submitting your drawings for the council to check against that, you know, traditionally that's a paper submission. And, you know, my background's an architect, and one of my first jobs, you know, starting off in architecture was printing out the drawing sets to submit to council. And that was like a day, you know, took you a day to print because you had to do 8 sets, because everyone, you've got to give it to all different agencies and departments within the council. And each set is like, you know, 100 pages on A0 or B1 paper. So that's like literally a whole day. And if you get that wrong, you've got to reprint. And so we've moved to, you know, most councils and most cities around are moving past submitting a paper. But you'd be surprised, there are still some cities around the world that they still accept the paper.
Wow. Tom, what's the status in WA?
Look, I'm getting all nostalgic, Ben. So when I was in my early career in the engineering world, I spent half my day printing out bloody plans and just threw one of them up. Oh, that's hilarious. But yeah, WA, it literally stands for wait a while. So we're probably 5 years behind you guys on the East Coast. But we still deal with a lot of paper submissions here, sadly. COVID has accelerated that. If there's one benefit out of it, it's a digitalization of these types of processes. But similar, it's a patchwork quilt. Each region is different formatted. It's not standardized. So if you come up with a solution for one area, it's going to be different in the neighboring area a lot of the time. So we need that sort of central communication to come up with a smarter way before we, state by state, start coming up with the best way to capture these details. And with the urban planning aspect of your question, there's a lot of sub topics that do come off that are also relevant, that tie into that. So it's not just the regulation itself. Ben alluded to the spatial aspects. So you've got things like environmental, physical parts about that location as well, such as the jurisdiction, the governing body, geographic area. So we're talking, you know, external factors that affect these regulations, like the wind and the soil. It all ties in together, and they're very different sets of regulations, often recorded in completely different ways. And so you've got to marry all these other aspects within to get these urban planning results sort of machine readable. And that was a bit of a challenge at the start. So when uDrew first started, PDFs were the absolute most common for a progressive council to accept. And they're just flat, dumb documents. That they weren't metadata PDFs. So I'm hoping at least this year we'll start seeing the metadata coming through, because the goldmine that releases as data for future analytics and capability is what I find really exciting. We will get there, and until that day, we'll be siphoning through leaky basements for boxes of PDFs to try and figure out clever ways to digitize and capture that information. But we are going the right direction. It's just slow. It is the final frontier, I feel. And there's some great solutions out there. Like, look at Will and Ben, what they've developed is just fantastic. And the more of this data that becomes available, the more of these innovations will be possible. And we've just got to bring it all together. And
so I was going to ask whether there was a central database of local government data, but I think we've conclusively answered the answer that is no. So maybe we need to be lobbying the land registry offices to make this one of their projects.
New Zealand, when they make it, it'll be called Nirvana.
It'll be called Utopia. Well, no, Utopia's it sends a whole different message, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So like step one, if you're a local council on the call, curious and interested about how you can take the first step towards innovation, upgrade your Adobe software to the latest so that the PDFs get a bit of metadata in them. Would that be like a really easy first step so that you can run it?
I would say like there's a concept that's been around for a bit called like rules as code, and that's kind of trying to take planning rules and structure them in a way that's kind of more machine readable. But it doesn't have to be that, but it's really about what are the parts that are objective, what can you pull out, how can you structure that in a way that companies' PropTech software can read it. And I don't think there's any one answer, but it's about kind of pulling that in. I suspect that you're not going to get one kind of standardized system that everyone uses, but as long as councils are preparing their documents and their work in a way that it starts to be machine readable. And I recently saw, I'm not sure if you guys saw, there was a RFP from North Sydney Council that said they want to make their DCP AI ready, and that was interesting. And that's a big step for a council to make, and it's probably the first council I've seen that is actively trying to make their DCP AI ready. I suspect off the back of that, there's probably going to be a lot more councils that say, how do we do it, and what's the what's the process? But it's good to see that direction happening.
Fantastic. Well, look, the three of you are all doing kind of aligned but different things in the space. So let's dive into each of you individually. Will, I'm going to start with you. Tell us, what does Propcode do?
Yeah, so our vision is right in this topic that we're talking about. It's building software to understand and analyze these regulations, these ones we're discussing, and whether they're in DCPs or whatever other form they take. And our goal, really, our vision is we're building technology that can go, take in these documents wherever they exist in any jurisdiction, and with the right amount of setup and the local expertise to kind of build into the system, could then power products to give people really solid answers around what does that mean I can do on this site, what are the rules that apply to this project, and eventually helping make the assessment more efficient. So we started in New South Wales. I've worked in planning in New South Wales, so that's kind of our obvious starting point. We've got a tool that analyzes CDC eligibility. So if you don't know New South Wales, that's a fast track approval pathway for certain types of projects, especially small residential projects. So that's the first thing we put out. And we are working really hard in the background, doing stuff that we've just been talking about just now around getting some of those existing documents, which are definitely not really machine readable, to be something we can take into a platform, an engine, and then put out a tool or tools based on that will give people really great answers for their projects. So stay tuned. We are going to put out something really exciting in the latter half of this year.
So who are your primary customers? Are they councils or are they other PropTechs, or who's using?
Yeah, so it's the end users are who we're targeting. So not necessarily sort of that we're a data provider to others, but the architects, the developers, We do expect to get councils and even state government using our products eventually, and we've had quite a few discussions already with councils. Have a council using the CDC tool that's already out there. So yeah, across the ecosystem would be our vision, and indeed each of those segments will have different needs. So the homeowner wanting to do a renovation or expansion of their house, that's quite a different use case and need than the high-end developer who looks at 100 sites a week. So the engine and the technology may be the same, but the way that product is shaped, what they say a report or whatever looks like, could be quite different. So lots of opportunity for innovation there at that end as well.
Sure. So if I'm a homeowner looking to do a renovation, what would Propcode tell me, or how would I use Propcode?
Yeah, so eventually the goal is we would have, let's say, a report that you just get sort of one click and you find out here's the rules that apply to your site. So not just a list of documents and good luck understanding them, but the actual rules. Here's what you can build on your site in your zone, given your shape and size of lot. Potentially we can take in some existing, let's say LiDAR scans of 3D building data and say, here's your building footprint. And so you've got this space in the backyard for a secondary dwelling, for instance. So there's a lot of things that we're really dreaming of and working toward that could be really helpful for that person who knows probably nothing about their planning rules.
Yeah. Look, I'm laughing because the house that we're in at the moment, we actually built it about 10, 15 years ago, and council had a draft plan for the colour of the property to make sure that people weren't building things that were, blights on the landscape, but it was a draft plan. So when we put our application in, we got told, well, if it's the wrong colour, it won't get approved. And we said, well, what's the right colour? And they said, well, we haven't got an approved colour plan yet, so we can't tell you.
Nice.
And so I chose something off the draft plan, and I said, well, this is what we've chosen. They said, oh, well, but that's no guarantee. It was like, oh, for God, it's not purple. Is that good?
Yep. And
we don't know if we're going to like that color yet. So
we don't know if we're going to like that gumtree green color. No, we're not sure. And we can't promise.
That may not be maybe it's not an unreasonable thing for council to want to control, as Ben was saying, as a look and feel that they want in character and et cetera. But man, some of these DCPs or whatever the local plan format is around the country really spiral out of control in terms of what they're addressing. I saw one little thing in Wollongong. They've got a chapter for firearms stores. How many of those are there in the Wollongong LGA? Probably not.
Well, we would not want to. We would not want to minimize that. Who knows? It could be maybe they've got one because it was an issue. So in the future, Will, you guys are really new. How old is your Proptech?
We've actually been building for a couple of years now already, with a bit of venture capital investment, but doing some pretty intense building, and so we're excited for what people are going to see us put out very, very soon.
So in a couple of years, So in a couple of years, what do you see the universe looking like in this space?
Yeah.
What does utopia look like?
I think very soon, I expect that people in the ecosystem will think, I can use technology or software or tools out there, online probably tools, to help me get these answers. So it's not a case of I have to go dig through the documents myself to find the answer first, or not even I'm going to call council to find it first, because I've heard so many people say it's actually not helpful to call council because they take forever to get someone on the phone, or they don't know. Hopefully they know, but sometimes they don't know. But often they actually don't want to give a really good answer for sort of liability reasons, or they don't want to be pinned down on, oh, someone told me this on the phone a month ago, and so that means that councils are very risk averse. And so I think I'm a believer that if we put software in people's hands that knows the regulations better than any of us do, better than council themselves knows it, then everyone benefits.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are too many regulations for any human brain to remember, right?
I've literally just did some calculations. The Sullivan DCP, just to pull out an example, 500,000 words, 1,800 pages for one council, 1,800 pages.
No wonder council workers are such a hard time. Tom, let's move over to you. Now, you guys were the winners of the Proptech Awards back in 2021 and 2022 from memory. tell us about what the problems are that uDrew is solving and how you guys are working in the space.
Yeah, so we do solve quite a lot. So a very high level pitch is that we are a collaborative platform that services the entire building life cycle from start to finish. So you've got a variety of different customers and stakeholders along the way. So an example of that, it starts off with a homeowner considering building something. So much like Will, you can type in an address and see everything you can and can't do on a location. And so it provides that education before they start going out to get quotes and whatnot. When they're ready to do that, we've also got some sales lead generation software that embeds on building companies and products and suppliers and retailers' websites. It shows their products. They can drag and allow people to go onto their websites, drag and drop onto their properties and get some calculations and quotes instantly. So that hopefully will convert to a sale. Then that company can open it up in our professional design software to create council-ready documentation plans, do all the structural engineering instantly, and get that through to their compliance officer who does their part, who then eventually gets it through to the local council. So by the time it's got to the local council, everything's completely digitalized, everything's fully auditable, all the geotechnical's done, the engineering certified all through this platform, and in theory, someone can start building straight away. And we also then go back around to the start when it's the decommission of a project, when it needs to start again. And so it's like an infinite sort of loop. And I mentioned at the start, we're a collaborative platform. So we work with companies to add to the system. So every company or government or whoever that signs up, they've got the ability to share their catalogs with buddy companies or put in their own rules and regulations and manage those internal aspects to add to the sort of thoroughness of it. So the result is quite a confusing pitch, but it is quite a large covering market. So our typical clients, or just some example clients at the moment, so homeowners, we've got tradespeople like bricklayers and so on who are using it to do instant quotes, retail supply products and building companies and modular companies, pool companies, governments, and we're also working with a few state governments around the world as well to hopefully incorporate that aspect and create the sort of centralized engine that they can use for analyzing which policies are working, which aren't working, and help shape that direction. So every collaborator that adds into it, it gets more powerful and it creates that sort of snowball effect that benefits everybody.
Okay.
So that's what we're going for.
So I love this because we've got Will, who's got an urban planning background. We've got Ben, who's got an architecture background. And we've got you, Tom, who's got a structural engineering background. So like this is where this panel is where it's geotechnical. Okay, sorry.
I like
so this is kind of where this is where it's all coming together. But what I'm hearing is that because in the old days, like last week, the way that you would do a council application would be you would design it, or you would come up with your best design, and then you would take it to council, and council would decide whether it was or wasn't match the code or whatever, and then you would decide the products that you would use to execute that, unless your architect had defined them. But what you're saying is that you've now basically pushed all of that right to the front. So you're designing and choosing products, knowing that what's going in is going to match or most likely to match the code and to work for code. Is that right?
You can do it both ways. So you can either design it all from scratch within uDrew, where it will automatically generate things. We're finding we're getting better industry traction, allowing their products to go in, but they're all custom as well. So it's not a precast, hard-coded rule check for their structures. It's checking everything dynamically based on the location, the geography, the soil type. It's all very bespoke, every site that it's calculating and checking. So you can do it either way.
Yeah, okay. But so how you're based in Perth, but how many states are you covering now?
We cover all of Australia and New Zealand. We've got a few states in the US covered at the moment, but we're not live there. Same with the UK and a few other places. It takes us about 3 weeks to get up and running live anywhere in the world. So we've built the rules engine. We've invested a huge amount of research time and come up with this very scalable, adaptable rules engine that learns. So we're about to go to the next level with that rules engine. and it should bring it down to a couple of hours per region, but that's still probably 6 months away, if I'm going to be honest. So work in progress, need some capital.
The whole 6 months, okay. You heard it here, folks, they need capital. So send your check too. So do you find it like, you've obviously worked with a lot of councils then, what's their response been, and how challenging are they to work with?
Yeah, look, in the early days, so, pre-COVID, we'd often just get laughed out of rooms for saying it's too complex to ever be able to do it in a computer. And I'd bring out my laptop, I'd show them, I'd do it in front of them, and they'd say, oh, it's a nice demo, but it'll never work. And it's like, I just did this in front of you. So attitudes have changed, and they're beginning to understand the capability and the power that you can do. However, there are certain instances which I wouldn't be confident in ever capturing. And a typical planner would say to me, what if I'm building a daycare centre on a volcano in a cyclonic wind region? What would your system do then? So they throw the very rare chances situation to sort of validate why not to do it, rather than why to.
Every situation is a rare situation. It's just that there's 10,000 of them.
Yeah. So they'd often look for reasons why not to do it, rather than the fact that we could filter out 95% of applications with absolute confidence. Then the 5% that are on active volcanoes and bloody shark-infested waters, they can still do that. So a big problem we had, which has got better with time, was the perceived threat to job security as well. But we've learned, maybe I've just got better at articulating it with them, but it's not a job taker. What this is, it's like when CAD came out for the design industry, there was a bit of, fear, like, oh, geez, am I going to lose my job? But a lot of designers quickly realize that, hey, I can do 20 times more jobs. If I screw something up, I can just press Control-Z. I have to go through a pile of erasers, and you can make multiple versions. So it's actually really increasing the efficiency and getting rid of the shit that people don't want to do. People don't go to university.
It's hamster wheel stuff, right? Yeah.
Exactly. You don't study for 4 years to approve a swimming pool. You want to be doing smart cities, better urban areas, and working on what's important, and maybe getting that high-rise approved, in 2 months as opposed to 9 months in your scenario. And so the efficiencies can be passed on and shifted. It's it was interesting though at the start, the wall that came up from the perceived threat. But now, whenever they embrace it, they just love it, and they become our biggest fans. But it takes a bit to get that embracing happening sometimes.
Cool. So how many council areas are using you guys now? Is that you?
Yeah, we haven't got as many as we'd like, but probably half a dozen. But in Australia, that is, and there's further more overseas and things. But
I would have thought, is it built on a volcano? Yes, no, tick. I just thought that would have been really AI-able.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, we flag all these situations, and then we can refer them to the right person to go speak to. So it just makes it more efficient.
Yes, talk to our volcano expert in room 79D.
They're all volcanoes in Western Victoria. So.
WA.
Yeah, not so many here.
No. Ben, look, let's move over to you. So, now seeing we've been talking about CAD drawing and architects. You guys took home multiple awards at the Proptech Awards this year, so congratulations. And you're going from strength to strength, not just in Australia, but also globally. So how do you describe Archistar these days, or does that depend on who you're talking to?
Yeah, I think it depends on who we're talking to, and it's evolved over time. So I kind of look at where we started, and as you noted, like, I'm an architect by background, so my natural, when I started this, essentially, I think it's close to 10 years ago. Our key focus was on design, and how do you streamline design, and how can you use systems to help you design faster? Because as an architect, you're drawing out all of these details and all this information, and it takes a long time to do. And I remember in university, showing my age, I they probably still make you draw in first year. Like you weren't allowed to use computer. And in second year, they says, you're still not allowed to use computer. And I'm like a tech person by nature, and I'm like, no, I'm going to use CAD. I'm going to teach it myself and just figure out how to use it. And I did a terrible job in second year, and I think I almost failed in second year because no one showed me what to do, and it's like, but by third year, when they said everyone can use CAD, they actually reached out to me and said, can you teach the others how to use how to use CAD? So I like kind of got into that kind of technical stream there. And I think Archistar, if you get down to the crux of it, this is a complicated space. There's a lot you need to know. And as an architect, you're meant to kind of pull all that together and coordinate. But, you're kind of like the big collaborator and coordinator, and you bring all those pieces together. But that's really hard to do. And there's so much information you need to know. So at Archistar, I think what we're trying to do is we're just trying to make that process easier and educate people, and how do you pull this information together in a really user-friendly way that you don't need degrees to figure this stuff out. If you own a property, you should be able to know what you can do on that property without having to read thousands of pages of document and trying to interpret that. So if we can make that easier for you to understand, hey, this is my property. What's the highest and best use? What can I do with this? What are my options? Everyone's, property obsessed in Australia. It's like, let's give the people what they want, and people want to know what they can do. And, you start with that, but then it's like, well, if we know what you can do on one property, these systems know what you can do on every property. How do you make the process of finding those opportunities easier? And we try to tie in as much as possible and bring forward as much as possible the different stages. So we brought in generative design so that, theoretically it says you can do this, but what can you design? And quite often at that point you go to an architect and, I want to put an apartment building on this. What can I do? Might take them a few weeks to come up with one or two concepts. The idea that we brought to the table was, well, could you get 100 concepts in 3 seconds? That check all the different options. And if you want to try and go higher, type the number and go higher. If you want to go lower, if you want to change, things like, can you go more strategic and let the computer do all of the grunt work? So, I think our journey has been all around how do you get the people the right information, up front as early as possible so you can make better informed decisions. But it's been a long journey. And I think Will or Tom was saying that you've got to get the trust of the industry. And this industry is like, if you look at property developers, they're pretty switched on. And even you look at architects, I feel like the barrier to for people to adopt this, it's so high because people expect so much. And, if you're like 1 inch out, it's like, oh, that doesn't work. And I think Tony's saying, like, people are looking for reasons why it shouldn't work, so it takes a long time to build trust. And there's a lot of things you got to get right for people to adopt this technology. Because it is so complicated, and people are aware that this is a very complicated thing, and like a surface level solution won't cut it.
No. The devil really is in the detail in this space, isn't it? So you've got developers who are very savvy and who you now, who I imagine you're starting to convert because you're able to show them quite quickly what's possible or what's possible. Then you've got the architects who are they anxious that you're like either taking jobs or dumbing down design, or like what's your response to that?
They like, we originally thought at the start, like, oh, we'll make software for architects, and it didn't really work out that way. I think that like developers saw it as an opportunity to quickly assess, and architects were very like, it needs to do all of this list of 200 things before we even look at it. So I think there's a whole range of like commercializing with architects is also hard too. But I think people, at all stages of this, you get that, is technology going to take my job? And I think that's a pretty standard response, that the first time someone sees something that, starts to automate parts of a job that they would do, it's natural to say, oh my gosh, like that's taking over my job. In reality, it doesn't happen that fast, and it's a process, and your job evolves as you do that. And it's just that fear that this is going to take over. We launched generative design like 8 years ago, and you can like pop up buildings instantly, but there's still architects around designing buildings, and there are parts of the process that now architects are using and say, well, I mock that part up using Archistar to quickly get some suggestions, and I do, this and that. And I think that's going to happen. Developers are just doing more. Councils are using these tools to check things, and it's not something that is wiping out jobs like today. I think over time, definitely, as this gets more advanced and more things are automated, it'll evolve and shift. But it's not like you turn up to work tomorrow and the AI has taken over and no one's got a job anymore. It's much more, I think, much more gradual.
But we are seeing it able to do a lot of the grunt work and to help you like hone in on what the options are. I know. There's kind of almost like, well, there's like little silos, aren't there, of data that sit inside this process. So there's data inside the CAD drawings. There's data inside all the PDFs and things like that, but they're not necessarily all joining up. Are you doing any? And I know that when I spoke to Anisi ages ago, she was saying that, look, if you can come up with all of these designs and then you're matching them up to the code, you're sort of coming up with the best designs, and then you can actually globally start to identify, well, what are the best designs, and therefore you can start to iterate off the best designs. Is that actually happening? Is there that loop like Tom's seeing?
Well, with like generative design, every design comes out structured and formatted in the same way. So you are getting that standardization of this is how they're coming out. One of the biggest hurdles, I think, with council and why it's a big issue is that every architect has their own style of drawing, their own format. Like there is no standardized way that you submit exactly like this into the council, and it's the same for everyone. Like there are things you need to submit. You need to submit a site plan, a floor plan, sections, elevations, but how you put that on the paper is up to you. What details you include is up to you. Some really experienced architects or designers, they'll put all the information the council needs to see in like a little checkbox table here, and this is the summary, like tick, 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 tick. Others won't do that, so, and every design is essentially, relatively unique. So every site is unique. So it's kind of, when you get something into council, it's like unique site, unique design, and unique format, so and then unique rules for different councils. So it's a very challenging problem to solve. And, if like generative design builds these designs out in the same structure and format every time, it's kind of on the other side when you submit your drawings, getting that structured in the right way that you can pull out the data and read it in a similar way. That's the next part of the puzzle that we're looking at with our e-check software. And but it's a challenging space. You can see why it's not that easy to automate, because everything is so unique.
It's all so unique. Tautology better, but we're all there. So you're also doing some work overseas in Canada and the US now. Are you working more with local government there, or are you doing?
Yeah. So if you look at all the stuff we've done to date with the core platform, where you find the sites, you look at the rules, you generate designs, it's all about giving you that information up front, so that by the time you submit to the council, you've got the best chance. Like you've done all your research, you've ticked all the boxes. And I think it's like similar to, Will and Tom, can we give you as much information up front so that you're reducing your risk and you know what you're going into. I think there's still the barrier that you do all this research and you do all this stuff and you prepare everything as best you can, and then you submit to the government or the council, and there's a different interpretation of what you thought it was to what they thought it was. And I kind of liken to it that it's like these rules are gray by definition, like there's subjectivity in it. I think the industry wants black and white, what's the answer? And even if you try and get that answer, like it still could be interpreted differently. So the work we're doing on the government council side is around checking those drawings and getting to kind of like a common understanding of what do they mean, and what do you need to design to get it through council. So we're doing pre-checks on the drawings to tick the boxes and make sure that you're getting those drawings correct according to the council. So we're doing a lot of work with the cities on that. As to kind of other side of you do all the work up front with the developers, the designers, the architects, but you kind of really need council on the back end coming on board too.
Yeah, cool. So, and look, this isn't just an Australian problem, right? This is globally, like every
problem.
Global problem.
Yeah.
And so sending all of our best wishes to all of the council workers out there across the globe, because you guys do great work building local communities. So what does amazing look like? Like, let's throw ourselves, how far into the future do we need to go to get to amazing? Are we talking 3 years, 5 years, 20 years, something in between? What does a seamless experience look like, and what could that empower for our communities, or how would it change?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think that the biggest factor, the biggest variable, the biggest thing that can change is actually how the planning framework is set up. So at that statutory level to begin with. If we all kind of muddle along with the way things currently are, and it's sort of like we're hacking together better technology to work with terrible formats, that doesn't look like the best, the best outcome, nirvana. What really needs to happen, and has happened on many rounds prior to today and will happen, is just planning reform. So changing the way that so usually in Australia, states create the planning frameworks and then local governments fill it in, and there's a balance, right, of how much control each side has, each level has. But there's been changes prior to today. So in New South Wales, the local environmental plans were not standardized prior to about 2006. And then the state government said, okay, we're standardizing them. You have to write them in this template. You have to use these zones. You have to include these permitted uses in each zone. And within that, the local government could paint what they wanted and write extra controls, but from a template starting point. And there's murmurings that development control plans in New South Wales are going to go that way as well. And all of us on this call would be cheering that on. So in other states, they've gone further. I think South Australia has essentially a wholly statewide written planning system, and the local governments just kind of pick and choose the aspects they want from the state level documents. And the spectrum of where the different states in Australia and overseas are on that. But that to me is the biggest thing, I'm thinking with my planning hat on, is the planning system is not set in stone. It can change. And certainly for us now, on the three of us on this call, are hopefully on the leading edge of technology, trying to bring this transformation. But really, there's probably a pushback from us and from our users to say to the governments, hey, let's actually design a better planning system, because technology is not going to go away. It's increasing. It's going to get more and more embedded in the way everything works, because it's the better way for things to go. Let's make a planning framework that is actually 21st century, that's not written in 1979 like the New South Wales one, and it's like technology first, written in a way. And we talked about machine readable as a concept. Can the state government create a DCP template where you could still sort of write anything you wanted as a council, but it's a machine readable template or format expectations, sort of thing. And as I said, hopefully bringing down some of the overall complexity, so that there is more standardizing of what the actual content is. And gosh, don't even get me started on GIS files and formats and the mess that is, you know, I worked with flood data for a long time in insurance, and you would think like a river flooding and a GIS data set of that can't be that much variation, right? But there sure is.
Yeah, right.
It's wild.
Yeah.
So you know, the states, in the sense that they've got that legislative authority to be the leader on setting those standards, they absolutely should, and we as the ecosystem should push for that. And the benefits, you asked about the benefits, what does that cause? Everything works better, everything works more efficiently, more effectively. The actual policies that government wants to implement, state or local, are going to be more likely to be realized because people actually know that that's there in the rules when you have a simpler system and technology that can operate easily throughout the system. So it's in everyone's interest.
So Ben, you mentioned before too that like of the 4 things that can be, you know, the 4 levels of it that can be different. One of the things that seems, you know, perhaps the easiest or the first step to change would be the format that things get submitted in. Like if that became unified, then suddenly the information you put into it can be, you know, unique and special and different. But just the format of it would be super helpful.
Yeah, I think like we've looked at, you know, how do things standardize, and you know, can you get like a common environment, and I think the more you look at it, like every council is so unique and every area is so unique, and and you know, it's a battle that's a very difficult battle to try and say everyone like look the same, you know, or everyone be the same. So
well, that's the fear, isn't it?
Yeah,
well, everyone's worried that they'll go down the little boxes path, and if you go down this path, everything's going to look the same, and
going to be the same.
Warringah,
you know,
will look exactly the same as Balmain,
exactly.
and Balmain would look the same as Warringah, and we can't have that.
Yeah, and so I think you need a solution that allows the differences and the local differences, and I think if you try and do anything but like, you're going to get a lot of pushback on that. So you need to embrace that. What I think, you know, the ultimate would be is it's, you know, as a property owner, as a homeowner, as anyone who wants to do something with their property, you can understand in human speak, you know, this is what I can and can't do, and you know what those limits are. And when you get that design made, you've got certainty and transparency. Like, I know I'm designing it right, and that's going to get approved, you know. And I think the process to go from start to finish could be 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year. I've heard, you know, like high-rise developments take multiple years to get approved. If you can shrink that right down, because everyone's on the same page and we know a good application should get approved. And, you know, good examples in New South Wales, like the CDC compliant developments, you know, you meet the rules, it's going to get approved. Like, it's transparent, it's very black and white. You know, a lot of the planning codes are not like that. So I think the more that we can get to, hey, you know, follow these rules, you do it right on your side, you get your ticks, and, you know, you can get your approval. It puts a lot of stability into everything. And I think if you look at the housing crisis, we need to deliver, you know, a lot of housing. If at every step you're uncertain, or there's no transparency, or you don't know if you're going to get forward or back, or you don't know how long it's going to take, that all adds instability into the framework. So the more, and it will rely on, you know, digital systems, you know, digital checks, you know, digital processes, because at every point on the way, you know, and people that get scared of that, you know, you think about engineering, you know, no building, high-rise building, goes through an engineer without running, you know, digital structural analysis checks. You know, like, you run it through the computer, you do your analysis checks, and it comes out with a report and says, you know, this is going to stand up, or you need to increase the structure over here, you know, and like it's relied on, you know, but you get an answer. And I think it's that transparency and that certainty that I think will like, based on what everyone's doing here, it's going to start to get more and more certain.
We're going to join the dots. Yeah, we're going to sort of just start to join those dots. Tom, before I go to you, I'm just going to put a call out to everybody who's on the call. If you've got any questions, please pop them into the chat, or into the, well, chat is easier than questions, if that's okay. But that would be great. Oh, hang on, we do have a Q&A. How does Propcode differ from Can I Build, Will?
Yes, thanks for asking. Can I Build, as I understand, and maybe this could be said a bit of uDrew as well, that it's focused on the builder as the user and the builder ecosystem, and indeed there's an ecosystem. It's not only the builders, and so there's kind of a lot of tools in a toolkit there. Propcode is going very deep on the planning rules themselves, and so like this whole conversation we've been having today. We're not necessarily going to try to be an all-in-one platform, touching every step in a workflow per se. But what we do want to do, and we talk about job replacement, and I'm not trying to replace town planners necessarily, but want to answer a lot of the same things that the town planner expert would be answering on a project, on a site. And so I see a lot of opportunity in Propcode today, and what we're going to be releasing as we go forward in the future, serving that really important function of giving the really deep and complex and hopefully authoritative answers on what do the planning rules say about that situation, that project, and how does that carry forward through to the assessment and approval.
Awesome. So Tom, awesome. So Tom, just to go back to you, what do you like? Have you got any examples of how much faster things are able to be approved or put in, like go from start to finish through using uDrew?
Yeah, look, my record is 1 minute and 36 seconds to get the project started from scratch
for 9 months.
and digitally submitted. But in fairness, I'm the founder and I built bloody software, so I know how to use it. But I did a pitch deck a while ago. So this is when we were still very much startup. Somehow, I can't remember the logic, but we calculated the Australian building industry would save 27,000 years of downtime per annum if we got rid of those bottlenecks and unnecessary delays just by streaming up the process. Now I can't remember the logic behind that, so I put a big asterisk next to that. But it's a phenomenal number nonetheless. And to Ben's point earlier, when we're talking about all the different combinations and structures, that also gave me a nostalgic flashback to our first prototype, which was all about front fencing. Believe it or not, very exciting.
I remember.
I did the maths into that at the time, and for our front fencing, like generative software that would design the whole thing for you in a second, there were 10 trillion combinations in Australia just for a front fence. And so when you can imagine, as the structure gets more complex and higher risk to human life, that number just goes straight up. So it does get pretty complex. But to your query as well, Kylie, just a minute ago, I really agree with everything Will and Ben have just said. Structure, I find, is a really important one. And I think it should start at the top and trickle down and allow for customization to take into account in these different regions, different policies, different regulations. So by that, I'm talking a bit broader because I'm also talking about engineering rules and things, but you've got Australia. We need the framework for an Australian-wide thing. Then we've got jurisdiction, which is state, local government areas, and then you can go infinitely deeper to development areas and funny little development rules. But the framework needs to start at the top so you can build on that. And progressively, as each state or region or developer comes on, they can add and customize their own part. So you need to maintain that transparency and control for each of these areas, or you are going to get a blanket solution across the whole country that won't necessarily work in every region because of some localized weirdness. Great example of a place that's doing fantastic things, and I reckon they're 5 to 10 years ahead of us, is New Zealand, I hate to say. No, I do love Kiwis. They've put some massive planning and thought over the last 5 or 10 years into how to structure this and get it standardized and rolled out nationally. Now, we've done a lot of work with the City of Auckland with this, and they do have a big advantage to what we do in Australia. They're an amalgamated group of about 8 or 9 councils from memory. And so they've got the clout. They've got the biggest IT shop in all of New Zealand is the City of Auckland. And they've got the foresight to be planning for this. And so it's resulting in this beautiful, centralized, pretty much open data for the whole country, which can then be built on to create that framework. And I'm very envious over here in Western Australia because they're about 5 or so years ahead of the East Coast and probably 20 years ahead of us over here. So I salivate when I think about all that beautiful data and structure and framework that they've set up, and it's just getting better every year. Another thing to consider is it isn't so much just about making planning easier, and it's not so much just a planning solution is what I should say. If you look at it more broadly, it's an economic development solution. So to my point earlier about saving 27,000 years, you know, who knows how accurate that number really is, but it's a big number. That's just so much more development that could be happening. It's going to result in cheaper, you know, building prices passed down to the end user, hopefully, and more jobs, more, you know, it's just going to be great for everybody. And it's a big task. It's got to be done properly. And if that framework and structure is in place, then it sets us in a good position to do it properly. And it will be ever evolving, ever expanding. But a lot of governments I've spoken to recently are very intrigued with the AI prospect of making an AI planner. You know, it's a good short-term solution, although there's inherent risk if the AI hallucinates or if it's, we haven't quite got that control yet. And it will be good. We could filter out a big chunk with it, no problems. But I think it's a lazy solution. You need to get the structure and the framework set up right so that AI can be trained properly and be able to interpret the rules and regulations accurately and to make sure it's safe for everyone and flexible.
Yeah, because I was going to ask that question too about what is the role of AI in this space, but really where we're sort of coming to is that AI only works as good as the data set that's driving it, right? And what we've identified as part of this discussion is the issues around collating that perfect, beautiful data set. Now I understand your volcano obsession, Tom, though, if you've been working with the New Zealand.
I was a geologist before, so I do like my volcanoes and dinosaurs for that matter. Cool. Basically a kid that didn't grow up.
So what we need, what needs to happen in the space, or what the vision is for the space, is that is a consistent, transparent set of regulation that sits over the top, that is sophisticated enough to allow for grassroots, you know, specialization that captures. Because what we're trying to capture here in local communities is the essence of it, what makes it feel like our place, right? Like this is the essence of place is captured in planning and regulations of what makes this feel like home to me, what looks and feels familiar. How do I, you know, what is the built environment that feels safe? And local council regulation has sort of been designed to capture that, but then it kind of got a bit crazy, and now it's built all of this complexity and opacity in it.
And the kicker on that, Kylie, is that it can all change. You know, like places evolve and change all the time. So it may look like this today, but then they rezone it, and in 10 years it's a completely different look and feel. So it's so it's that preservation of this is who we are. It's like, oh no, this is who we're going to be. You know, so you can never win with this. But
yeah. But I mean, I kind of feel like this is all tied into the ability to, because, you know, local councils are full of NIMBYs and now YIMBYs, but NIMBY, what does NIMBYism comes from? It comes from fear that my amenity is going to be taken away from me in where I live. And so, you know, the ability to virtually walk through the design because it is compliant, and actually I can't see into your bathroom. So it's like my neighbours can't see into my bathroom, all of that sort of stuff, right? Yeah. So look, we're coming up to time, so I don't want to hold everybody up. We've got a couple more questions, so let's just quickly bust them out. When will your platforms and AI cope with more subjective planning parameters like heritage and be useful in the heritage conservation areas? And what are the limitations in planning that are difficult to crack?
We could do a whole nother webinar.
On heritage.
My answer there is it's not a question of getting AI or the technology to do the subjective part, and that's where it's not a question of job losses or you know, eliminating jobs. You will have planners and you will have advisors and consultants, whatever, to talk about things like heritage, because That's
because
a human
that's the
thing,
complicated.
right?
Yeah. We're basically doing the 75% of the heavy lifting so that the humans can focus on the 25% that actually requires brain and context and concept. Fellas, it's been feelings about the area and connection and all of that stuff that we really value. Fellas, it's been absolutely fantastic to have you on the call. Thanks so much to Tom Young from uDrew, Will Sullivan from Propcode, and Dr. Ben Coorey from Archistar. Thanks for an awesome conversation. I guess what we now need to come out of this is a position paper from the Proptech Association on the need for a centralised data set, or if not data set, then at least planning form that we can start to work with local government on. But look, let's follow this up at the Proptech Forum, which is on scheduled now for Thursday, the 14th of November in Sydney. So I hope everyone can make it along to that, and we can continue this and many other conversations. Grab your tickets online. Thank you so much, fellas.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers,
See
Will.
ya.
Thanks.